I should have known better than to trust the word casual when it came from my sister. Her text popped up on a Thursday evening while I was folding laundry, the soft buzz of my phone breaking the quiet rhythm of socks and shirts. Brunch on Sunday. Nothing formal. Just family. Come by. A second message followed almost immediately. We'll make room. That last part lingered longer than it should have. My name is Eliza Morgan. I'm 34, recently divorced, and, according to my family, the flexible one. That's what they call you when you're expected to adjust, accommodate, and quietly accept whatever shape they decide to pour you into. Flexible. Like it's a compliment. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. My sister, Claire, hadn't checked in on me since the divorce finalized 3 months earlier. No, are you okay? No, do you need anything? Just silence. And now, suddenly, brunch. We'll make room. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I'd promised my therapist I'd stop reading subtext into everything my family did. Maybe this was her olive branch. Maybe casual really meant casual. I texted back a simple, sure. See you Sunday. When I told Jonah, my friend who'd been crashing on my couch while his apartment was renovated, he raised an eyebrow. Your sister? The one who schedules holidays like corporate meetings. It's just brunch, I said, forcing a smile. He didn't argue, but the look he gave me said what he didn't. Brace yourself. Sunday morning arrived bright and smug, the kind of day that makes you believe in second chances. I took extra time getting ready, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I didn't want to look like I hadn't tried. I chose a soft blue dress, comfortable flats, minimal makeup. Casual, I reminded myself. The restaurant Claire had picked sat at the edge of downtown, all exposed brick and potted plants, the kind of place with chalkboard menus and wait lists that made you feel lucky to be inside. I arrived 10 minutes early. Old habit, born from years of being told punctuality was respect. Through the front window I saw them. My parents. Claire. Her husband Mark. Our cousin Lena. Even Aunt Ruth, who lived an hour away and complained about driving anywhere before noon. They were already seated at a long table near the window, drinks in hand, menus open, laughter floating like it belonged to them. I paused just inside the doorway, the hostess smiling politely as she asked if she could help me. I'm with them, I said, nodding toward the table. As I walked closer, my steps slowed. I counted chairs without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 people. 6 chairs. No empty seat. Claire spotted me first. Her smile flickered, just for a second, before settling into something polite and thin. Oh, you made it, she said, standing halfway as if unsure whether to commit. I didn't think you'd be early. I came a bit ahead, I replied. Thought I'd help if you needed anything. She glanced at the table, then at Mark, then back at me. Right. Well, we already ordered. My mother leaned over, her voice warm in that practiced way that always felt rehearsed. Hi, sweetheart. We assumed you'd be running late. I swallowed. I'm on time. There was a small, awkward pause, just long enough for me to feel it stretch. Then Claire snapped her fingers lightly, scanning the room. We can pull up a chair, she said, not moving to do it. Or, she pointed vaguely behind me, there's space at the high top by the bar. That might be easier. I turned. The high top was wedged near the service station, close enough to hear the clatter of dishes and the hiss of the espresso machine. A single tall stool sat there, tucked under the table like an afterthought. Everyone else had a place. Except me. I can sit there, I said, because that's what I always said. Because making things easier had been my role for as long as I could remember. Claire nodded, relief washing over her features. Perfect. We'll catch up in a minute. I walked to the high top, my cheeks burning, and climbed onto the stool. From where I sat, I could see the whole table clearly. See my father gesturing as he talked. See Lena lean in to show my mother something on her phone. See Claire laugh, her head thrown back, sunlight catching in her hair. I ordered coffee I didn't really want and wrapped my hands around the mug when it arrived, letting the heat ground me. I told myself it didn't matter. That proximity was close enough, that this still counted as family time. But as plates arrived, eggs Benedict, stacks of pancakes, fruit arranged just so, I realized something that settled heavy in my chest. This wasn't an oversight. This was the plan. And for the first time, instead of shrinking to fit the space they'd left me, I felt something shift. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. I stayed on that stool longer than I should have. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that once someone finished eating, they'd notice me perched there like an extra coat and insist I join them. That's how it works in families, right? Someone always makes space. Except no one did. The server came by and asked if I wanted food. I glanced toward the table instinctively, like I needed permission. Claire was mid-story, her hands animated, everyone leaning in. No one looked my way. Just a croissant, I said. Plain. When it arrived, I picked at it slowly, crumbs collecting on the small white plate. From my angle, I could hear pieces of conversation drift toward me, Mark complaining about work, my dad talking about golf, my mother laughing a little too loudly. Familiar voices, familiar rhythms. I felt like I was listening to a podcast about a family I used to belong to. Claire finally turned in her chair and smiled at me, that bright, hostess smile she perfected years ago. "You good over there?" she called. "Yeah," I said automatically. "All good." "Great," she replied, already turning back. Something in me tightened. I watched as a chair was pulled up to the table, by the server, not by my family, to accommodate another guest arriving late. A friend of Claire's, I realized. Someone I didn't know. They greeted her warmly, shuffled plates, made space without hesitation. So there was room. Just not for me. I felt foolish for not seeing it sooner. The words from the text replayed in my head. "We'll make room." Not "we made room." Not "you'll have a seat." Just a vague promise, flexible enough to bend around me without breaking. I finished my coffee and stood, my legs stiff from balancing on the stool. As I walked past the table to refill my mug, my mother reached out and touched my wrist lightly. "You should come sit when you're ready," she said softly, as if the choice were mine. I looked at the table. Plates crowded, elbows brushing. No space. "Sure," I said. "When there's room." She smiled and nodded, satisfied. The moment passed. I returned to my corner, heart thudding now, not fast, but heavy. I wasn't invisible. They could see me. That was the part that hurt the most. I pulled out my phone, more for something to hold than anything else. A message from Jonah blinked on the screen. "How's brunch?" I stared at the words, then typed back, exactly how you'd expect. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. "Want it out." I considered it. Imagine texting back, "Please come rescue me." Imagine slipping away quietly, letting this be another small wound I'd explain away later. But something inside me resisted. I thought about all the times I'd done that, left early, stayed quiet, adjusted my expectations so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. All the holidays where I sat at the kids' table long after I stopped being a kid. All the birthdays celebrated on dates that worked better for everyone else. I wasn't tired of them. I was tired of myself. The check arrived at the table, placed neatly beside Claire. I watched as she glanced at it, then slid it closer to Mark. He frowned, did some mental math, and pushed it back. A low, tense exchange followed, nothing loud enough to draw attention, but enough for me to catch the edges. "That includes the extra drinks," Mark muttered. "Well, everyone ordered," Claire whispered, her eyes flicking briefly toward me then away. Toward me. I hadn't ordered anything beyond coffee and a croissant. The realization landed with a dull thud. Even from the margins, I was still being counted, inconveniently, silently as an added cost. I stood up. The movement caught Claire's attention again. "You leaving already?" she asked, surprised. "I think so," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Oh, okay," she replied, then added quickly, "We'll do this properly next time." Next time. Always next time. I walked toward the register, the server meeting me halfway. "Can I help you with anything else?" she asked kindly. "Yes," I said, taking a breath. "I'd like to take care of the bill." Her eyebrows lifted. "Just yours, or—" "All of it," I said. She hesitated, glancing toward the table. "The whole table?" "Yes," I replied, reaching into my bag for my card. My hand didn't shake. That surprised me. As she walked away, I stood there, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something sharp and clean. Awareness. I wasn't doing this to be generous. I wasn't doing it to keep the peace. I was doing it because I finally understood the rules of the game I'd been playing without realizing it. If I was going to be treated like an afterthought, I'd stop pretending my presence came free. The receipt printed. The server returned, slid it toward me gently. I signed, thanked her, and picked up my coat. As I passed the table one last time, no one noticed. They were mid-laugh again. Forks paused in the air, sunlight still warming their faces. I stepped outside into the crisp air, the noise of the restaurant muffled behind me. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A text from Claire. "Did you seriously just leave?" I didn't reply. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like explaining myself. I hadn't even reached my car when my phone started vibrating again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a call. "Claire." I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the quiet parking lot. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and rested my forehead against the steering wheel for a moment, breathing in slowly. I wasn't crying. That surprised me too. I drove home without turning the radio on, letting the silence do its work. My thoughts didn't race, they lined up. Every memory suddenly had context. Every maybe next time formed a pattern I couldn't unsee. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had 6 missed calls and a handful of messages. "What was that about?" "You embarrassed us." "Mark is furious." "We need to talk." I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and kicked off my shoes. Jonah looked up from the couch, concern written across his face. "You're back early," he said carefully. "I left," I replied. "And I paid." His eyes widened. "You paid for all of it." He didn't ask why. He just nodded slowly, like someone who recognized a breaking point when he saw one. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. I answered. "Eliza," she began, her voice tight. "What happened back there?" "I left," I said evenly. "You don't just leave like that," she replied. "It was rude." I let out a small breath. Was it rude to invite me somewhere with no place to sit? A pause. Then, "You're being dramatic." That word. The family's favorite eraser. "I sat at a bar stool," I said. "Everyone else had chairs." "Well, you know how those tables are," she said. "You could have waited." "I did," I replied. "For an hour." Another pause. Longer this time. "And the bill?" she asked finally. "I took care of it." Her tone sharpened. "Why would you do that?" I thought about my answer carefully. "Because I'm done being included only when it's convenient." She sighed. "You always take things so personally." I almost laughed. Almost. After we hung up, the quiet felt heavier than before. Jonah brought me a glass of water and sat beside me. "They're going to spin this," he said gently. "I know," I replied. He was right. By that evening, the group chat lit up. Messages from my father, my cousin, even Aunt Ruth. "You shouldn't have caused a scene. Family doesn't keep score. Claire was trying to include you." "Include me?" I stared at the word until it blurred. Claire showed up at my door just after 8. I hadn't told her where I lived. She'd gotten the address from my mother years ago, back when I still believed proximity meant closeness. I opened the door before Jonah could stop me. She walked in without waiting to be invited, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. Her smile was gone, replaced by something tight and offended. "What was that today?" she demanded. "I left," I said. "We've covered that." "You paid the bill like you were making some kind of point," she snapped. I replied. Her eyes narrowed. "You could have just said something." I met her gaze. "I did. For years. You just didn't hear it." She scoffed. "Don't turn this into some victim story. You always do this." Something in me went still. "Claire," I said quietly, "why didn't you set a place for me?" She opened her mouth. Closed it. Looked away. "There wasn't room," she said finally. "There was," I replied. "You made it for someone else." Her face flushed. "You're overreacting." I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm reacting appropriately. I'm just not smoothing it over for you anymore." Jonah stepped closer, his presence steady. Claire glanced at him, irritation flashing across her face. "This doesn't involve you," she said sharply. "It does when you walk into my house and start yelling," he replied calmly. She turned back to me. "You've changed." I considered that. "I hope so." She left in a huff, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. When the house finally went quiet again, I sank onto the couch, exhaustion catching up to me all at once. That night, I lay awake replaying the brunch, not to punish myself, but to understand it. The patterns were obvious now. I'd been filling gaps for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to be chosen deliberately. The next morning, my resolve was tested again. A message from my father. Your sister says you're upset about a chair. Is that really worth damaging the family over? I typed deleted, typed again. It was never about the chair, I finally sent. It was about never having a place. He didn't reply. And for the first time, I didn't chase the silence. Silence has a strange way of provoking people. The quieter I became, the louder my family got. By midweek, my phone felt like it weighed 10 pounds. Missed calls. Voicemails I didn't listen to. Messages that all said the same thing in different fonts of guilt. You're taking this too far. Claire feels terrible. Why can't you just let it go? Let it go. As if it were something I just picked up accidentally, not something that had been sitting on my chest for years. I went to work, answered emails, sat through meetings, smiled when required. On the surface, nothing had changed. But underneath, something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't bracing anymore. I wasn't preparing my defenses for the next emotional hit. On Thursday evening, my mother showed up. She didn't knock. She rang the bell twice, sharp and impatient, like she expected immediate access. I opened the door because part of me still hadn't learned how not to. She walked in and glanced around, taking in the quiet apartment, Jonah's shoes by the door, the half-read book on the coffee table. So, she said, folding her arms, this is how you're handling things now. I gestured toward the couch. Do you want to sit? She didn't. Your sister hasn't slept in 2 nights. I waited. She's embarrassed. My mother continued. People noticed what you did. What I did. I asked calmly. You paid the bill to make a statement, she said. You made her look bad. I nodded slowly. She didn't need my help with that. Her eyes flashed. That's unnecessary. No, I replied. What's unnecessary is inviting someone and not making space for them. She sighed, pressing her fingers to her temple. Why do you always turn small things into principles? Because small things repeat. But I didn't say that. I said, because this wasn't small to me. She studied me, like she was seeing a stranger. You used to be easier. That one landed. I used to be quieter. I corrected. Those aren't the same. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Your father thinks you owe Claire an apology. I shook my head. I don't. For what? She snapped. For feeling hurt. For not making a scene, I replied. For leaving quietly. For paying. I didn't yell. I didn't embarrass anyone publicly. You embarrassed her privately, she said. I met her gaze. Good. Maybe now she knows what that feels like. She stared at me for a long moment, then reached for her purse. I don't recognize you anymore. I recognize myself, I said softly. She left without another word. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a document I hadn't touched in months, my budget. Not because money was tight, but because I wanted to see it clearly. Every transfer, every temporary loan, every shared expense that had quietly become permanent. Claire's name showed up more than any other. Rent supplements, utility bills, emergency fixes that somehow never ended. I'd never tracked it closely before. Seeing the total made my stomach twist. I wasn't just emotionally accommodating. I was financially enabling. The next morning, I called the property manager for the condo Claire and Mark lived in, the one technically in my name, because my credit had been better suited at the time. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't vent. I asked a simple question. What's the process to step back from financial responsibility? The answer was simpler than I'd been led to believe. By the afternoon, I'd sent an email. Clear. Professional. Calm. Effective immediately. I will no longer be covering expenses related to the property. Please direct all future correspondence to the tenants. I stared at the sent confirmation longer than necessary. My hand shook, not from fear, but from finality. Claire called within an hour. What did you do? She demanded. I stopped paying for things I don't live in, I replied. You can't do that, she said. We rely on you. I know, I said. That's the problem. She laughed. sharp and disbelieving. This is because of Brunch? You're blowing up our lives over seating. I closed my eyes. No. Brunch just showed me where I stand when I stop accommodating. There it was. Silence. Then, quietly, you're punishing me. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. I'm choosing myself. She hung up. That night, Jonah made dinner and didn't ask questions. We ate in comfortable quiet, the kind that didn't ask me to perform. For the first time in a long while, I felt the edges of peace. But I also knew something else. This wasn't over. Families like mine don't let go of control easily. They just change tactics. And somewhere, I could feel the next move forming. The backlash didn't come all at once. It arrived in waves, polite at first, then sharper, then theatrical. By Saturday morning, my name was being passed around in family conversations I wasn't part of, my intentions rewritten by people who needed a villain more than they needed the truth. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions, and sent messages that started with "I don't want to take sides," and ended with instructions on how I should behave. I stopped responding. That silence became its own offense. Claire's message came through just after noon. "You've made us look unstable. People are asking questions." I stared at the screen, then placed my phone face down on the table. Jonah watched me carefully. "You okay?" he asked. "They're panicking," I said. "Not because they're hurt. Because they're losing control." That afternoon, my father called again. I let it ring. Then again. On the third attempt, I answered. "Eliza," he said, his voice heavy. "This has gone far enough." "I agree," I replied. "It should have ended years ago." He sighed. "Your sister says you're cutting her off financially." "I'm stepping back," I said. "There's a difference." "You can't just abandon family," he said. The word abandon felt deliberate. "I didn't abandon her," I replied. "I supported her. For years. Quietly." "That was your choice," he countered. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "And stopping is my choice, too." A long pause followed. Then, "You're changing the rules." "No," I said gently. "I'm finally playing by them." He hung up without saying goodbye. By evening, Claire escalated. She posted online. A carefully worded message. Vague enough to sound dignified, emotional enough to draw sympathy. It's heartbreaking when the people you count on decide you're no longer worth the effort. I never thought family would treat us like strangers. No names. No details. Just implication. The comments rolled in quickly. "You deserve better. Stay strong." Some people forget where they came from. Jonah read over my shoulder and exhaled slowly. "She's setting a narrative." "I know," I said. "Are you going to respond?" I shook my head. "That's what she wants." The next knock on my door came Sunday evening. Mark. I hadn't expected him, but I wasn't surprised either. He stood stiffly on the threshold, arms crossed, jaw tight. "We need to talk," he said. "No," I replied. "You need to leave. This is between you and Claire," he snapped. "You live in a house I've been paying for," I said evenly. "It involves me." His eyes flicked past me, scanning my apartment like he was searching for leverage. "You're acting like you're better than us." I met his gaze. "I'm acting like someone who wants a place in her own life." He scoffed. "You think that brunch gave you some kind of moral high ground?" "No," I said. "It gave me clarity." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You're tearing the family apart." I didn't raise mine. I didn't pull the threads. I just stopped holding them together. He left angry, unsatisfied, exactly the way control seekers do when their usual tools stop working. That night, I lay awake thinking about the phrase my mother used. "You used to be easier." She was right. I used to make space for everyone else, even when there was none left for me. Monday morning, an email arrived from a lawyer representing Mark's parents. Polite, formal, concerned. They were worried about the sudden withdrawal of support. Mentioned stress, displacement, children. It was a threat wrapped in civility. My hands trembled as I read it, but my resolve didn't. I forwarded the email to a lawyer a colleague had recommended and scheduled a consultation. When Jonah asked if I was scared, I thought about it honestly. "I'm scared of going back," I said. "Not of going forward." The lawyer was calm, precise, unshaken by drama. She asked questions, took notes, and finally said, You're well within your rights. That sentence felt like oxygen. By Wednesday, formal notices were sent. Boundaries made official. Language clear enough to withstand pressure. Claire called again. You're really doing this, she said, disbelief cracking her voice. Yes, I replied. This is permanent. So is the pattern I'm ending. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She said, I never thought you'd choose this. I answered quietly, I never thought you'd leave me without a place. The line went dead, and for the first time, the quiet that followed didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The silence didn't end abruptly. It softened. At first, I didn't trust it. I kept expecting my phone to buzz, the doorbell to ring. Another emotional ambush disguised as concern. But days passed, then a full week. No calls, no messages, no carefully worded guilt. Just space. I didn't realize how rare that was until I felt my shoulders drop without permission. Jonah noticed first. You're breathing differently, he said one evening as we sat on the couch, plates balanced on our knees. I am. Yeah, he smiled. Like you're not waiting for something to explode. He was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing myself. On Friday afternoon, an email came in from the property manager. Short. Professional. Tenants have vacated the unit. Keys returned. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I'd imagined this moment with anger, maybe even grief. Instead, what I felt was quiet acceptance. Like closing a door you didn't realize had been drafty your entire life. That weekend, I went back to the restaurant alone. Not out of spite. Out of curiosity. I sat at a small table by the window, ordered coffee, and watched families come and go. Chairs pulled out. Plates shared. People leaning toward each other without calculation. It struck me how simple belonging looked when it was genuine. No one had to ask for a place. They were just given one. As I stirred my coffee, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. The first in days. Your sister is moving out of town. She says it's best if there's some distance. I read it twice. Distance. As if it were something accidental, not chosen. I typed back slowly. I hope she finds what she's looking for. That was all. No defense. No apology. No explanation. She didn't respond. Later that night, Jonah asked, Do you feel guilty? I considered it honestly. No, I said. I feel sad, but I don't feel wrong. Sad for what could have been. Sad for the version of my family I kept hoping would show up. But sadness wasn't a reason to betray myself anymore. Weeks passed. The noise didn't return. I removed myself from the family group chat. Updated my emergency contact. Closed shared accounts I hadn't even realized were still open. Each small action felt like reclaiming a square inch of my life. One evening, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old photo. A holiday dinner from years ago. Everyone smiling. Me half out of frame, chair pulled back, leaning in. I studied it for a long time. Then I placed it in a box, not to throw away, but to store properly. The past didn't need to be erased. It just didn't need to sit in the center of my life anymore. That night, Jonah poured us wine and asked a question he hadn't asked before. Do you miss them? I thought about it. Really thought. I miss the idea of them, I said. Not the reality. He nodded. That makes sense. As winter settled in, the holidays came quietly. No invitations. No negotiations. No seating charts to decipher. Just calm mornings, warm light, and conversations that didn't require me to earn my place. On New Year's Day, I wrote something in my journal. A sentence that felt like a promise. I will never again accept an invitation that doesn't come with space. Not just a chair. Space to speak. To be considered. To matter. Because that brunch had taught me something no confrontation ever had. Being included isn't about being present. It's about being wanted. And if someone tells you we'll make room, but never actually does, believe the actions, not the words. I used to think walking away meant losing my place in the family. Now I know better. I didn't lose my place. I stopped asking for one at a table where everyone else was already seated.